what's going on, and what it means to you. This is Local Talk Radio, 660 AM.
And you've got it on KFAR, where it is time right now for Patriot's Lament, brought to you in part by Bighorn Enterprises. For all of your trucking and construction needs, call 451-7310.
If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go from us in peace. We ask not your counsels or your arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were our countrymen. Samuel Adams.
The time is near at hand, which must determine whether Americans are to be free men or slaves. George Washington.
And what country can preserve its liberties if its rulers are not warned from time to time that this people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Thomas Jefferson.
Posterity, you will never know how much it cost the present generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you will make good use of it. If you do not, I shall repent in heaven that ever I took half the pains to preserve it. John Adams.
I sincerely believe that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies, and that the principle of spending money to be paid by posterity under the name of funding is but swindling futurity on a large scale. Thomas Jefferson.
Government is instituted to protect property, this being the end of government. That alone is a just government, which impartially secures to every man whatever is his own. That is not a just government, nor is property secure under it, where arbitrary restrictions, exceptions, and monopolies deny to part of its citizens that free use of their own faculties. James Madison.
It would be an absurdity for jurors to be required to accept the judge's view of the law against their own opinion, judgment, and conscience. John Adams.
Whenever the legislators endeavored to take away and destroy the property of the people, or to reduce them to slavery under arbitrary power, they put themselves into a state of war with the people, who are thereupon absolved from any further obedience, and are left to the common refuge which God hath provided for all men against force and violence. John Locke.
It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here, idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but for me, give me liberty, or give me death. Patrick Henry.
My people perish for the lack of knowledge. God.
Welcome to Patriot's Lament right here on KFAR. This is Local Talk Radio. I'm Steve Floyd, the man behind the microphone on the other side of the console today. Joining me in the studio, Aaron Bennett. Good morning, Aaron.
Good morning, Steve.
And, of course, I see you can put your hand down now. I see you put your hand up in the air just like the song said. Thank you, sir. And joining us right now on the phone for the first 10 minutes or so of the show, we've got a special guest today who is going to be speaking tonight over there at Pioneer Park, and the keynote speaker of the first annual Golden Days Business Expo. Please welcome to the show Michael Boldin. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Awesome to be here with you.
It's good to have you here. Is this your first time to Alaska?
Never been. You know, I grew up in Wisconsin, and I thought it was kind of like the other Alaska, but I'm telling you, it's an entire different country here. It's amazing.
Good. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying the land of the free up here. Thanks for coming up. Let me ask you this here, and then I'll kind of open it up to you to see whatever's on your mind. But in terms of the climate right now nationally, I mean, obviously you're coming up here. You've been speaking on the Second Amendment or on the 10th Amendment issue. Do you find that there is momentum right now that people have had enough of federal involvement, or is this just more political posturing getting ready for the next political cycle?
Man, I think it's really actually growing. It's growing to the point that it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum. The mainstream is kind of saying, uh-oh, watch out for these people. They're a little crazy. I mean, you've got, grassroots activists on the right who are genuinely opposed to things like health care mandates, and they're working to pass like a health care nullification bill, a bill that passed in North Dakota that said, hey, this whole entire Obamacare, not just the mandate, is null and void in our state. And then you have people who would be traditionally associated with the left. Just this week, a county in Washington state said that, we want to have our local food ordinance how we want. We want the FDA out of our lives. Generally people who, the way you envision someone who's kind of like a food hippie. Well, that doesn't normally fit in with the right around a lot of the country, and Washington state is often very liberal, and they're saying, federal government, get out of here. But these are only two examples of many things that are going on, and I think more and more people across the political spectrum are recognizing an important fact that it doesn't matter which political party is in power or what individual is occupying the White House, that federal power is always growing, and it's affecting our liberty, it's affecting our economy, it's affecting all parts of our lives, and in a bad way.
Now, Mr. Boldin, I'm finding myself probably typical of most people here in the community where I feel frustrated. I feel like there's not really a whole lot that I can do as an individual as I watch the people that I've been told my whole life, hey, the way to affect things politically is to vote for the right person, vote for the right party, yada, yada, yada. You send these people to Washington or even here locally, you send them down to Juneau, and they end up acting just like everybody else. They end up voting for the same ridiculous tax and spend proposals. They end up taking more of our freedoms, taking more of our money, and I find myself saying, what's the point in voting?
Not a bad question, actually. I mean, if you look at the history of the growth of government in the United States, we the people have been voting the bums out for probably a century or so. And like I said, it doesn't matter what political party's been in there. That government power has always grown. So government is bigger now under Obama than it was under Bush. And under Bush, it was bigger than it was under Clinton. And under Clinton, it was bigger than... You just keep going back and back and back. And there's only been one small, maybe a couple small stages in the last century where elections have resulted in a reduction in the size of government. I believe maybe the Eisenhower administration, there was a period where government actually got smaller. But that was only a Band-Aid, because then the next guy gets in there and it gets bigger. And this has been the progress of the growth of government for far too long. And more people are recognizing that, going to the federal government to fix problems that have been created by the federal government is not just absurd, it doesn't work. And that's why they're doing things like in North Dakota. They're working to get things passed in a state that says, you know what, federal government, you may say, or maybe your courts will say that Obamacare mandates are constitutional, but we don't care what your opinion is on it because we're not going to allow it to be enforced in our state. Or Stevens County, Washington. We don't care if you guys think that the FDA should be able to raid a local, milk producer that's just selling things in the community. Well, we don't care what you say about that. We're going to do it anyway. And I believe that the only way we're going to be free is if we learn how to be free, whether the government gives us permission to or not.
Now, here's what's going to happen. I'm just seeing what's happened here locally with the EPA and with the threat that they've given to us to, quote, clean up our air, which, by the way, is no dirtier than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 40 years ago. The only issue is that they have tightened the standards on us. Now, they're giving us this mandate that we need to clean up our air, or else what? They're not threatening to send in troops. They're threatening to take away our federal teat.
Yeah, well, they've been threatening states across the country for a long, long time. They recently threatened the state of Texas over their decision. They were working on passing a bill that would just, stand up for the Fourth Amendment, that old nasty thing, saying that the TSA shouldn't be able to grab you in your private areas without probable cause. Well, Texas crumbled, but there are other states that have not crumbled under threats. Montana, for example, was threatened a few years ago by the Bush administration, and they said, implement the Real ID Act, or we're not going to allow your people to get on a plane or go to a federal building. Not that I really want to go to a federal building, but they threatened them, and the governor there, not a big fan of them, but at this particular situation, he said, you know what, we tell them to pretty much just go to hell, and we're going to govern the state the way we want to govern them. And I believe that when enough states and enough people say no to Washington, D.C., they may bluster, they may push around, and they may threaten, but there's not much that they can really do without our cooperation.
Okay. Granted, I believe that intellectually, but if you've got people at a state level who will crumble, even if the people are not ready to crumble, what do we do then?
Sure. Well, that is the most difficult situation. And you're talking to someone who comes from California, so whatever you've got going on here, I probably have it far worse in most situations. And yes, you got to get somebody on your side. I think that's really the bottom line. It becomes very difficult without even getting, let's say, your local township to support you. But you have a far greater chance, and this is why the founders created the system that they gave us. You have a far greater chance of getting someone on your side locally or maybe on a state level than you ever will in Washington, D.C. I mean, I could call Nancy Pelosi's office, till I die, and I'm never going to get a positive answer or anything in support of the Constitution. But I might, even though my local government in California and in Los Angeles is pretty nasty too, I might be able to move some stones by activating locally. You can actually reach the people.
What I'd like is for our local people to grow some stones, not necessarily move some stones. Let me ask you this, Michael. I know you're going to be speaking tonight, and I don't want you to give away your punchline, but do you have a course of action that we can take? Is there something that we can do specifically that is short of grabbing our pitchforks and torches, or are we at that stage?
Well, there is a middle ground, and Thomas Jefferson gave us some advice about this, and I'll go into a little bit more detail out at the speech this evening. But Jefferson said there's a middle ground between unlimited submission and violent revolution. There had to be a method of actually, I guess it's so simple a 3-year-old can do it. They use the word no. And we have to first start saying no. We're not going to comply. We're going to refuse to go along with this. And then we're going to force our states to do the same thing because we'll have a better chance to get our states to do this. And we've seen states around the country actually say no to Washington, D.C. 25 states have rejected the Real ID Act. And the federal government has had to back off on implementation on that so many times that they just, in most of the country, the thing is virtually null and void, and it's never even been repealed. So the first step is really just learning to say no and recognizing that, like I was just saying, going to the federal government and hoping that voting the bums out and that the new bums are going to say, oh, all this power you've handed me on a silver platter, I don't want it. That just isn't going to fix things. Change is going to start within us, within our own actions, within our families, and within our communities.
It's funny that message is probably not all that unfamiliar to most people that listen to this radio station or this program, because that is very similar to some of the things we've been saying, both on an individual level. Hey, so what if they come up and ban wood stoves in our community? I don't know anybody that has a wood stove that's going to stop using it.
Right. In places around the country, this is amazing. There's a website called Lemonade Freedom, I think, or Freedom for Lemonade. There's been local governments that are actually fining kids for having lemonade stands. I mean, could you think of that when growing up? This is just as American as apple pie, a kid learning the value of business and a buck and things like that. And even though the dollar obviously isn't worth as much as it used to be, but understanding this type of thing, trade. And governments are fining kids for doing this. Well, I guess if enough people just start having lemonade stands, are they going to throw us all in jail or fine us all for having lemonade stands? Sooner or later, it just gets to the point of absurdity. And again, it gets down to that simple thing that a 3-year-old kid can say all day long, no. No, no, and no. Beautiful.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. Is there anything else you'd like to say before this evening?
Well, no, I think we got the ball rolling, and I appreciate you having me on for a few minutes today.
Absolutely. So you're going to be there tonight at Pioneer Park?
7 p.m.
7 p.m. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Have a great day.
Appreciate your time. You betcha. That was Michael Boldin. Once again, he's going to be the keynote speaker tonight. He's the founder of the 10th Amendment Center, and he's going to be over there at Pioneer Park for the first annual Golden Days Business Expo. The expo itself runs from 4 to 8 p.m. Be a number of tables there. You can find out from local